Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Chas Hathaway. And a lot of our audience has an interest in near-death experiences, but Chas took his interest to a whole new level. And I'd like for him to tell us about that experience that he's went through his life learning about near-death experiences.
You bet. Thank you so much, Peggy. First off, it's great to be on your show. I really appreciate this.
Thank you.
And the whole subject of near-death experiences, it wasn't entirely new to me when I first started looking into it. I'd heard a little bit about them throughout my life, and my own grandma had had one. I had heard only, not exactly whisperings about it, but I'd heard rumors about it, but didn't know much of the details, so I'd always been a little bit curious about the other side and what was there and so forth. I believed in heaven. I believed in afterlife. I grew up in a very religious home and very active, faithful member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Still am today. But what I didn't get much of was details about the other side. And maybe about 10 years ago or so, my curiosity, at the time, it felt like curiosity. It just felt like, I wonder what else I could learn about this and so forth. But I see now that I think it was more of a calling. I think the other side was kind of calling out to me saying, it's time to look into this. You've got some work to do. And, but I just told everybody when I talked to my wife, for example, about, why I was reading about these things, I was just curious. I'm curious more detail about what I can learn about the other side, and started going to websites like, I think the first one I discovered was near-death.com, which just has, a bunch of near-death experiences, usually pulled from the International Association for Near-Death Studies and the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation websites. And I think they just picked out a bunch of these experiences to post on there. And as I started reading these, I was like, well, where are these coming from? Who are these people? And it didn't take long for me in really digging into them to find out these are just everyday people who have had either a close brush with death or something similar, maybe some amazing experience, almost always completely unexpected. It wasn't like people were maybe praying and fasting and asking for some
Right.
deeper experience. They were just living their lives, and then suddenly this thing out of nowhere comes usually because of either a car accident or some other close brush with death. And as I studied these things, I was really just blown away at both the quantity of experiences and the depth and quality of the experiences that people were having, and the details were it just blew me away. And I was sharing with my friends, neighbors, everybody I could, get an ear to just tell them about this cool stuff that I'm learning. And I realized at some point that not only was I becoming kind of annoying to them because I was just pouring this out there, but I was getting I felt like a balloon that was just so full of just this, both excitement and this information and just fascination with all of this. I felt like I was going to pop if I didn't find some way to get it out there. And I had written books in the past, and I had tried my hand at podcasting several times. And while the books had, I'd done a few things with various nonfiction type books, and my podcast had never really caught on at all. And this time, I decided I'd start the podcast, and I started working on a book at the same time, knowing that books take a long time to write. Maybe this would be an opportunity to, test the waters a little bit with the podcast. And unlike anything I had experienced before, within about a week of putting out those first couple of episodes, I had people contacting me, reaching out by email, and saying, wow, thank you for posting this. This, I've been wondering about these things, or maybe I had my own experience. And, I was like, whoa, I'm not used to people finding my stuff so quick. And I had just posted it on this, one of these podcasting platforms, podbean.com, or one of those kind of things where it's just, free, set it up. And it, by the time I had posted several podcasts, I had lots of people contacting me, and I realized I'm going to have to get my own website and set this up proper, because they've got a limit of how much you can put up. And it was clearly working, and it was clearly something that there was great interest in. And so, I got the website, near-death-experience-podcast.org, and also working heavily on the book as well. And, since then, it's just been a ride, because not only have I found all these experiences across the internet and NDERF.org, the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, and IONS, but there were people contacting me that were listeners and saying, hey, I had a similar experience. And so I started, either interviewing or having them write into me the experience. And it's really been a cool ride. It's really been fun.
I think I was your guest once, a few years back.
Yes, you were. Yeah. And that was one of the experiences I've heard a lot back from people about, and just really excited about what they were hearing.
Cool.
Yeah.
And so did you get your book finished and got it out there? And was it about near-death experiences?
I did. In fact, I've got a copy in here. I should have had it ready, but here we go. It's called Life in the Spirit World, What Near-Death Experiences May Teach About Life on the Other Side. And my focus in the book was to kind of give as big a picture as I could get of what the other side actually looks like, feels like, is what the experience of being on the other side is probably like. And it's such an interesting experience trying to put something like that in a book, because, the more I come across these experiences and read about them, the more I realize this is something that we are all absolutely, utterly familiar with. We've just completely forgotten. And that's obviously part of the reason for this life. We needed to leave that incredibly joyous, beautiful place to come to this place that is anything but, and experience what we came here to experience. But it was interesting to me how many people, while it's like something clicks and they're like, oh, I'm home. And some people will experience, buildings and houses and so forth, and they'd be like, yes, this is the house I grew up in, and whatever grew up in means in a place where you've existed for eternity. I don't know, but it's really interesting, because the other side is a place that is so familiar to us when we are there, and so to capture that and be able to kind of bring it to earth a little bit, that kind of became one of my goals with everything I'm doing relating to near-death experiences, is that we are these eternal beings with this incredibly beautiful heaven that we came from, that we're returning to. One of my goals has been, what if we can bring some of that here, not just by, knowing what is on the other side, but being able to take what we learned from the other side and actually start putting it here, and in the way we live, and the way we treat other people, and the way we see life around us. And so that's kind of been one of the things that I've tried to do.
One of my guests said that the other day, and he said, can you imagine what that would be like? I'm like, no, I can't imagine.
No.
Not turn on the news and seeing all the murder and mayhem and fighting and
I know. And honestly, that's been something that, there's a lot of kind of side, I don't want to say side effects, but some of the things that it's got me thinking about that I was not expecting as a result of this is I'm starting to question, wow, why, if we are such, beautiful, loving beings on that side, why do we bring such such horror and devastation here? And the only thing that I can seem to find in terms of actual purpose for pain and suffering and so forth is that there is a deeper level of love and experience that we can experience only by stepping away from the absolute joy and positiveness of the other side. It's that whole, you have to taste the bitter in order to really be able to understand the sweet. And there's no question this life has a lot of bitter, a lot of bitter. But because our potential contains so much love and joy and light, I think this life gives us the greatest possible way for us to learn what it really means to love, what it really means to bring light into the world and so forth.
When I was a social worker, we would refer people to different services and they weren't working. And I got checking into it and come to find out the percentages of all these programs we were sending people to had very low success rates. The best success rate was, surprisingly, Big Brother, Big Sisters. They had an amazing high success rate. And, I think back as you're talking, I think back working in the prisons, working with drug addiction and mental health, etc. Even children's services is I'm thinking, gosh, just like a light bulb come on. That's what we need. We need better services, and the service needs to be a mentor, someone on a daily basis that you can call, or someone that they can live with, or, stay at a community with, that is constantly, that's not right. This is why you shouldn't do that. Maybe try this. Because some people grow up just not learning the morals, or if they did learn them, they forgot them. And I was in a pre-law class one time, and I always struggled through school, and but when I was in this pre-law, it's like I had a knack for this, and all it was an online pre-law before we was supposed to start law school, and all these smart people, because I'm thinking everybody's smarter than me. I'm so dumb. I'm going to have such a hard time. But this pre-law stuff, all it was cases. And you read the case and you said how you thought it should turn out, how you think the judge would rule. And I had a knack for that. Like I was batting 1,000. Everybody else was asking me, how did you get that? And all it was having a moral compass. That's all it was. And I was realizing so many people don't have that moral compass to look at a situation and see why it's wrong, see what should be done instead. And when I went to the Corrections Academy, I got the highest score they ever had on hostage negotiations. And I'm thinking, well, maybe it's all those years of doing therapeutic foster care constantly on a daily basis, turning somebody around, changing their thinking. And I think as you're talking, I'm thinking, that's what we need is more relationship. We're so, especially now during this pandemic, we're so isolated. And there's people out here, because I see them in the comments on my videos, and they're lost. And the near-death experiences does help put things in perspective for a lot of people.
Yeah, it really does. In fact, as you mentioned that whole mentorship thing, there's real power in that, because one of the things that really stood out in in my studies of near-death experiences is the life review, where someone is re-experiencing their life completely through, but not just from their own perspective, also from the perspective of those with whom they interacted. And it's astounding to me how powerful people were affected by just simple interactions with well-meaning people. There'll be somebody who, maybe somebody was being bullied, and then somebody reaches out to them, takes them by the hand, and says, hey, it's okay. I'm here for you. Just small things where someone is stepping in to express a little bit of love that absolutely changes people's lives. And they don't see it at the time. You don't always see in the time that you're doing things the effect of your actions. But when you reach out to people in love, out of a sense of wanting to help, a sense of wanting to do good, even if it doesn't feel like you're really doing anything, just that intent has incredible power, and it changes lives every day.
And so often we're tempted to meet anger with anger instead of with understanding. And I think back to a few years ago, there was that case they had on TV where a guy went fully armed into a school, and the lady at the office talked to him just like a regular person. And he ended up putting his weapons down and nothing bad happened. And she just says, oh, I've had bad days too. And this happened to me, and this is what I did. And he was still thinking about it. He was still prepared. But after a while, and he was treated like a person. And, so many times somebody has come at me with anger, and I've just went back at anger, because you're in that set, like you got to defend yourself. But then there's been times somebody's come at me with anger, and I just sat and listened, because I can remember times people did that with me. I come at them with anger, and they're like, Peggy, what's wrong? What's going on? And then I would just start bawling. Instead of the anger, I would just start bawling and bleed my heart out. And, anger gone. And it seems like everything people's keeping score. And like the movies we watch where, the bad guy comes and then the good guy, fights back, and the good guy always wins. And it's like, we want that win. We got to win this. Yeah. And sometimes winning isn't for everybody else to see. Sometimes it's on the inside, where the accepting of a loss, accepting of a defeat, accepting that you just got sand kicked in your face again, and finding that inner strength and the wisdom to comprehend and wrap your head around it and go forward and help people, instead of, well, I'm just going to get back at the world. And so many people are dealing with that.
They are. It's really challenging right now. And one of the things that I think we have a little bit of an advantage with as a society now, that and be the things, because hearing, for example, someone like you talk about how you feel like lashing out with anger when they come forward with anger. It's not like those of us who are seen by people as positive, good people don't have the same temptation to lash out and so forth. It's just a matter of choice. Life is really, really hard for all of us, and any of us who anyone that you can, looks like they have all down, like everything's just right. They're just maybe good at showing the good parts and hiding. Have really, really hard lives, and we have kind of plateaus of times when things are pretty good for a while, and then we have times where it's just dang hard for a long time. And sometimes just being able to, like you said, the lady that talked down, the guy that caused mass violence. I mean, she knew what it was like to have a horrible time and probably feel like wanting to be violent and so forth. That's something that we're all familiar with. And sometimes being able to come down to someone's level and say, okay, you don't want to go around saying, I know how you feel, I know what you're going through, because sometimes we just don't. But we do all share the experience of life being really hard at times, really hard. And I think it's kind of nice. And I wonder if it's part of this, time that we're living in, where light really is flooding the earth. And while darkness is as well, I think we're able to see each other in a little bit more authentic light than was even allowed, 50, 100 years ago. Because if there was, say, mental health challenges, it was like, oh, we got to shut that down, or they're going to put you in a mental institution and you're going to be, and we've got these challenges, and we can face them with love, with choices, rather than having to either hide or lash out. There is a way to face every situation with light, even when we're in this depth of feeling that darkness.
I know you were doing the podcast for NDERF for a while.
Yes.
Jody and Jeff. And
yeah, in
I
fact,
had
we still are. And
okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Oh, I thought I saw some. I tried to find it this morning, and I see some guy on there. It was like 2019 said you were no longer doing it, and I'm like, what? When did that happen? So.
Oh no, that was there's a little bit of a story behind that. I took a break for a little while.
Oh,
so there was
okay.
a little while in 2019 where I stopped doing the podcast for, I can't remember if it was 6 months or a year, but I did start it up again. No, with working with NDERF, that was kind of an interesting experience, because I'd been doing the podcast for maybe about a year up to that point, and I just reached out to Jeff and Jody Long on the internet to just say thank you so much for posting the near-death experience website that you've got. This has been such an incredible tool, and I just kind of felt like, because I had so many people reaching out to me and saying thank you for sharing this, and I felt like I was getting credit for things that these experiences. I didn't put this on the internet. I'm just reading them, and so I kind of reached out and said, thank you for doing this. People on my podcast are just blown away by the experiences. And she, Jody, reached out to me and said, you know what, let's, if you'd like, let's make you the official podcast of the Near Death Experience Research Foundation. And I was like, are you serious? Absolutely, that would be amazing. And she's been so good to work with. She helps me to know, like there's a list of, for example, permissions and so forth, that, because some people, they want to share their experience and just, want to keep it on the low side, so they don't want it blasted before the world beyond the website. And so she's able to get me the ones that say, yeah, do what you want with this. This is great, and so forth. And that's been a good thing, so that we can honor people's wishes when they share these experiences and so forth. But yeah, the cool thing though about that as well is that we've had people reaching out to us and saying, hey, I'm in Russia, and I would love to do the same thing here. Can we do this? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, so we get in touch with Jody Long, and she's like, yes, that would be fabulous. And
That's
so
cool.
Now we've got a Spanish version, a Russian version. There's a couple others that are in the works. I mean, it's just really cool, because these are experiences that are happening all over the world, are looking for the answers, because their uncle had an experience or their child had an experience, and they're like, what is going on? And they look it up, and it turns out this is a thing, and not just a thing, but it's something very, very common. I think the last statistics I've heard is about 1 in 10, 1 in 7 to 1 in 10 people have had a near-death experience of some kind. And, we're talking about hundreds of them every day that are happening, that, most of them quite simple, some of them more profound and in depth. But, this is something that's going on all the time. Oh, one thing I wanted to say too, when I took a break with the podcast for a bit, had a wonderful man, John Messer, reach out to me. And, he's got a great voice, a great podcasting voice, and says, "Hey, would you consider letting me give a go at this? Just so that we can
Yes, he
keep
has
this thing
that
alive."
radio voice. That is a good
Yes,
voice.
a beautiful podcasting voice, and a great interviewer too. So he started reaching out to people and doing interviews. Yeah, when he reached out to me and said, "Would this be possible?" I was like, "Are you kidding? Yes, that would be awesome. That way it doesn't have to die off." Let's
Is
keep
he
it
a
alive.
near-death experiencer or someone like you just interested in it?
He's like me. He is just interested in it and very, deeply touched by other people's experiences. And so, when I felt like it was time to get back on board again, he's like, yes, come back. And so now we've kind of had a good system of, he does a lot of the back end administrational stuff and maintaining the website, as well as doing some interviews and so forth. And then I do my weekly reading from, near-death experiences that I come across, either on NDERF or IONS, or wherever, so it's been a really cool experience doing all that.
I was on being interviewed by Christy Salisbury on her podcast one time and mentioned IONS and ISGO, and she didn't know what that was. And so I was able to get her hooked up with them. As I thought they hadn't had Australia yet, any connection from IONS. So I got her hooked up. Like, yay, I feel good. I got a country hooked up with IONS.
That's so cool. She's amazing too. She interviewed me a couple of weeks ago, and I'd been following her podcast for years as well. So it was so cool I'm just amazed at how this is so universal. She's in Australia. You've got, like we said, people in Russia, people in Europe, all over the United States, South America, many parts of Asia. It's no wonder. We're all coming from this place of perfection and light and glory down to this really rough earth. And when we have these glimpses of the other side, it's so cool that the world is connected enough that we can start sharing this stuff, and it can be made universal, because it's been happening throughout time in these little pockets of, within families and within little groups, and some people are labeled as crazy, and other people are thought of as some kind of shaman or something because they had some kind of really deep experience that nobody quite understands. And now we're able to compile all these experiences that people are having and just learn so much. It's incredible.
Yeah. I'm Southeast Ohio. There's no such thing down here, especially a few years ago when I started connecting. And Jody was my first connection. That's the first connection with NDE, right, that I put my story on their website, and I thought that was it. There I did it, and that was I was done. That was my mission. And then Jody sent me an email because they put in the exceptional NDE category, and then she sent me an email and asked if she could put it in her book. And so I'm chapter 14 in Jody Long's God's Fingerprints, Impression and Near-Death Experiences. And I thought, wow, I never thought anything, let alone exceptional, but then in her book, I'm like, I couldn't believe it. And then when I was in IONS and I'm starting to do the talks and going to conferences and stuff, I started running into an issue and I didn't know who to talk to. So I sent Jody an email, and I'll never forget what she said. And it comes to me pretty frequently. And I hear her say in the email, she said, whatever you do, do it with love. And so when I start feeling angry and Jody says, do it with love. So, okay, calm down here, do it with love. And that's come back to me a lot. And first IANS conference I went to, the only one I went to, 2017. I just started to become a group leader, so I went early on a Wednesday to go at the group leaders conference. And I am so hillbilly, and I am so backwoods, Ohio. I'm uncultured, as you can imagine. And I mean, I'm not around people normally that speak in different languages, and so I'm sitting there, and the mother in me hears two guys talking, and they're interrupting. Like this whole thing is going on. There are people talking, they're interrupting, and I'm glaring. I'm giving my mother look, my stink face, like. And I realized the guy was interpreting another language to this man. Oh my God. I did like a couple of those faces, like, oh, I'm so stupid. I'm so embarrassed. Interpreting like German or something. They come from another country. It's been a culture, experience for me being in Southeast Ohio. And, now I'm friends with people in California and New York and everywhere in Australia, and so I have learned.
Yeah, it's so cool how it really is a very uniting and connecting subject, because not only have we all had, family or friends that have had these experiences, and it's funny too, because I'll talk to people and they'll say, I don't know anybody like that, and I say, just start asking around, just start asking people if, for example, if somebody has a close brush with death and is out for a time, just ask them, do you remember anything from before you woke up? And almost always you'll get them kind of saying, well, I haven't told too many people this, but, and then they'll share something amazing. And I tried it myself. Some friends of ours, neighbors, older couple. I'm trying to remember what the wife had experienced. She'd fallen or something, and got knocked out and had to go to the hospital and have some surgery. So it was something that was kind of serious, life-threatening, but we'd been assured by people they were okay and stuff. But I went to visit them and talking with them, how you doing and stuff, and she was improving and so forth. And I asked her, so do you remember anything from the time that you were unconscious? And her husband kind of looks at her with a grin and says, tell him. and she just, well, it's not much. I just remember being in this place, feeling incredible love and hearing beautiful music. She's like, that's all I remember. And I was like, there it is. Those are the kinds of things people are experiencing all the time. It's not dreams. There is such thing as having a dream, while you're under. We've all had bizarre dreams throughout our lives and so forth, but there's a difference when when someone has a near-death experience. It's just accompanied by such a sense of love, or a sense of incredible consciousness. They're like, I feel like I am awake, and yet where am I? What is this? And so forth. There's just something different about it. And if people just start asking, and you do it politely, because not everybody's ready to share, and you don't want to push, but you start talking about these things, or just share an experience you heard from somebody. People will often say, oh, well, I had something like that once, and it's just something that I'm glad that we're starting to open up about these things, because for hundreds of years people have either had to be quiet about them, not tell people, or they've kind of taken on a role as some kind of spiritual individual, but even then they're not as likely to share what they experienced, because it doesn't make sense according to their background, and so forth. And so they just have these insights and or maybe after effects, like people will often have with near-death experiences, and suddenly be able to connect with people on a deeper level than they were able to do before. So anyway.
Yeah, and so many people watch these as entertainment, and they're not getting it inside. It's kind of like going to church and never being saved or never seeing the light, you know. It's like they watch, but they're not getting it. And it surprised me here a couple years ago. I heard Raymond Moody, who, of course, coined the phrase near-death experience and all this research, and he never really believed. He thought it was interesting. He was researching it. He was looking at it from a philosophy, I guess, standpoint, but it didn't go in until he heard Jeffrey Olson's story.
Really?
Yeah. And he says, I now know.
Oh, that is fascinating. You know, I love Raymond Moody's stuff for so many reasons. One of them, I love his description of what a skeptic is, because he describes himself as a skeptic, but not in the modern usage. You know, we kind of use the modern term skeptic to mean one who doesn't believe, or one who refuses to believe, or something like that. But he says, traditionally, a skeptic was somebody who leaves the answer open, and is not willing to come to an absolute conclusion about things. And so when somebody shares an experience and so forth, he would approach it skeptically, not so much in the, I don't believe this, but rather I don't not believe this, and I don't believe it. I'm leaving it open to the possibility that it's true and the possibility that it's not true, kind of thing. And that kind of stuck out to me. And I kind of took a little bit of that approach with my studies of near-death experience. Not the I don't believe it part, but rather the part that says, I'm leaving it open to the possibility of this. Because a lot of the things I would read, I'd be like, whoa, that just sounds out there to me. I don't know what's going on in this, but I'm going to leave it open to the possibility. Maybe there's some truth to this, even though I don't understand it. And that, to me, was kind of key to being able to develop, I guess, the spiritual maturity to be able to start really accepting them. Because, when you first come across something that sounds just out there, it's so tempting to throw it away. But I've developed for myself what I call a shelf system. I've got, this group of shelves where, at the top is the things that I absolutely believe. No matter what anybody tells me, I believe this. There is no question about it. On the bottom shelf would be the things that I just don't believe. And then you've got all these shelves in between where I kind of think, you know what? I don't exactly believe that, but I'm going to put it on this shelf, not throw it out, but put it on this shelf of I don't think that's true.
Right.
But what I've noticed over time, as I've put things on various shelves, that I believe this, but I'm not sure. I might believe this, but I'm not sure. What I found is that many things start bumping up shelves over time because it starts filling in gaps. You'll find along these things that I believe, there's a couple of gaps that the thing on the shelf below that actually fills in and explains very well. And then there's gaps within there that's like, I don't know, how does this work? But this person down here talked about in their experience, they had this happen. Well, that would explain this, even though I'm not fully ready to embrace that with my whole heart, but that idea kind of makes sense. And what it's provided me with is this perspective of there's a lot more going out there than we know. and that's wonderful, and that's beautiful. And I don't want to know it all now. I'm going to learn as much as I can. And I don't want to be someone who knows so much that there's nothing else to research. I want to keep learning, and I want to keep finding new things, because it's so, it just broadens the spirit the more you can learn, and the more you're willing to not necessarily accept everything that you hear, but to have a excuse me, but to have a place to sit in reserve where it's okay that I don't believe this right now, but I'm going to remember it. I'm going to make a note of it. And eventually down the line, you start finding answers. And sometimes what'll happen with that is that you realize, oh, this, though I have every reason not to believe it, and I don't believe it, I can see why they came to that conclusion, why they thought this was taking place, because of this, this, and this, which I do believe. And it's kind of like, you kind of get to a place when you approach it that way where you don't have to be afraid of learning things. And that may sound funny to probably much of your audience and so forth, who have the spiritual maturity to be willing to listen to the things they're not familiar with, so to speak. But oftentimes in the religious world, people will shut out ideas because, oh, well, my religion doesn't teach that, or I can't find that in the Bible, so I'm throwing it out. When in reality, often these things are very in line with the core tenets of your religion. There's just all this culture kind of built up around it that makes it hard to filter through. And so anyway, I guess my point is, it's nice to have an open heart about spiritual things enough to be able to consider the possibility that there are things going on that we may not yet understand.
Right. Well, on my Amazon book reviews, I've seen a couple of times people say, well, her story just doesn't ring true to me because it's not beautiful. They want a beautiful landscape picture, everything. They want to picture heaven is perfect. And right. I was telling God off in my second NDE. I had that anger. I was mad, like, hell no, I won't go. You can't make me. I'm not going to stay here. And so, no, it wasn't beautiful. It was my NDE, though, is what happened. And then in the comments on these videos, I see a lot of skeptics. Oh, this certain person's story, it doesn't go with the Bible. Or this person's story, that couldn't be true because this or that. Or they need to repent, or they need to something. They don't let it in their heart. They don't see it through eyes of compassion. Right. They see it through eyes of judgment, which is fine. I'm not asking everybody to throw their common sense out the window. Bring your common sense, bring your questions, bring your doubts, just come, see what happens,
Yeah. And the cool thing about it too, when you take that approach and just say that, come, at least, just listen, just try listening, kind of thing. What you start finding is that so many of the groups out there, say, for example, I'm in a very Christian community, and I don't hear a lot of things against, say, Muslim, for example, or Buddhist and so forth, but you sometimes get a sense that people are afraid to hear, for example, if you ask someone would you be willing to read the Quran, they'd be like, oh, no, I don't want to be deceived. Or, like they're afraid of other people's religious texts for fear of being deceived. And I kind of see it the other way around now. When you approach spiritual things with an open heart, what you find is commonalities, tons of commonalities. And you find that probably 80 to 85% of the differences that we find between people's either religious beliefs, spiritual beliefs, are often just a play on semantics. It's often using a different name for things, or, for example, you hear of a lot of people who have a near-death experience. Maybe they grew up in a Christian background, and their experience may have even confirmed many of their beliefs, but they also suddenly find a great interest in Eastern religion because of its sense of connection with everything, and this idea of meditation, and some of the elements that they don't get as much of in the backgrounds that they grew up in, and they find great value in what they learn from that. And that tells me that we can learn from everyone. I mean, there is not a person on this earth that is not a teacher, that cannot be a teacher to every other person on the earth, for some of the things that they learn, that they know, that they've experienced. And if we have the humility to accept that fact, we're going to also have the humility to realize, well, maybe in this silly argument that I'm having, or this weird argument that our government is having with their government or whatever, maybe those things actually don't matter as much as we think they do. And I think there's potential for that kind of approach to completely change our approach to each other as human beings. And there's no reason for us to be at war with one another. There certainly has to be a stop made when horrible acts of violence or whatever take place, and certainly we have to defend ourselves, things like that. But most of the time, the things that lead to our wars and dissensions, our grudges and so forth, are misunderstandings and plays on semantics that you just missed a few things, and you're blocking out communication because that grudge or that hate is feeding you some level of I don't know, it's serving some purpose that there are better, more constructive ways to meet those purposes anyway.
I was driving down the road one day a couple years ago with a friend of mine, and she saw a yard sale at a church, wanted to stop. So she's looking through things, and I was just starting my INS group at the time, before COVID, because that all went out the window after COVID. But I thought, So I walked inside and I asked the ladies, "Is the preacher here?" "Yeah." "Can I talk to him?" They went and asked him. "Yeah." He said, "Go on in his office." And I told him about my INS group. I was starting, and just right down the road from this church. And has there been anyone come to him say they had an experience like that? He said, "Yeah, they have." And I said, "What do you tell them?" And he said, basically, it's the devil. And I said, "Well, because I wanted to know if I could come like after his church and maybe talk to people who's had experiences and invite them to the group or something." He's like, "Oh no." He's like, "I gotta protect my flock." And I was like, "From me? Like, you think I'm the devil?" And so I was just trying to understand his perspective. And I said, "Well, could you just like give my phone number, the ones that do say they've had it and they're coming to you for answers? Could you just give them my phone number? I mean, you don't have to allow it in the church, or you don't have to prove it." And he says, "No, I protect my flock." And I know there's a lot of Christian churches in this area, and I'm sure everywhere, but they don't believe we died and went to heaven, because they think we all go at once. When Jesus comes, like in Revelations, and comes and takes everybody up, that everybody's lifted from the graves, and we all go at the same time. So there's no way we went now. And I didn't realize until I heard Jody Long say that actually it's a small percentage of people that have seen God or Jesus. And I saw both. So I was like, well, I didn't know I was in a minority. God there was a panel of people, it was just the outline, and God was sitting up front and center, still just the outline. But I instinctively knew that it must be God. And that's why I started griping at him. I got a complaint department. But then Jesus, though, he come later, when I asked God, I agree to stay if my sons would be better off without me for whatever reason. You can look in the future and see. And then I seen like Jesus standing there from behind, like waiting on me. I assumed it's Jesus, because it's, what we see on TV and what we see in the pictures. And I think we're shown things that we're going to get. They're not going to show me a Jesus like, who's that? They're going to show what we picture. And so I seen this guy, this brown, wavy, curly hair to shoulder length. from behind. And then I'm this invisible me, and then I see a physical me from behind also stand there, join him, and then boom, we drop out of heaven, and it's suddenly above our trailer. And then when we come back, I saw Jesus sitting in front of God. God is still with that invisible outline, and Jesus is instinctively knowing that's him. And I can't say I saw him. It was like this knowing where he was sitting. And in the Bible, I guess it says he sits on the right of God. Well, it was on my right, so it would have been God's left. But I don't know if I put the picture with it, but I know I'm crying at the floor of heaven in front of God. But my hands come up and I'm pleading to Jesus, though. You know, why not God? I don't know, but I know I'm pleading up to Jesus. And I said, who else will teach them about you? And then I'm back. And so, you know, this is, of course, before I knew what NDE was. I thought it never happened to anybody. And so, but my story don't fit with religion. It doesn't fit in the NDE realm of is beautiful, and it doesn't fit with what people want to believe that, oh, there's no judgment. A lot of NDErs will say, oh, there's, and researchers and stuff, oh, there's no judgment, there's no hell. And I said, well, talk to Howard Stormer about there being no hell. And as far as no judgment, I judged myself, and I judged myself harshly in my second NDE, because it was my fault I died. It's my fault my boys will be raised motherless. It's my fault my twins died. And I took it on. And they talked about life review, and I would watch like I Survived and Back and stuff. Like, what are they talking about life review? I think they're making that up. I can't even picture that. Because, like, say, we come into it with our own judgments. It may not be, I don't really believe this, you know, like you say, put it on a shelf. But I wasn't at that point yet. I was like, I don't think so. Then I realized, well, mine was a life review. Only God didn't show me. I showed him. I showed him my life, because I wanted God to see every abuse I went through as a child. And they come by real fast, whoop, 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 like that. And like little clips, just real fast. And I wanted him to see that it wasn't safe for my kids to be on earth without me. I didn't want one thing that happened to me to happen to them. And so I was like, that was a real life review, but that's so different, because everybody else is like, God showed them, and like you're saying, like something good that they did or something they didn't realize it was bad. I heard a guy say one time that he padded his travel expense account and had an NDE, and he was showed that was very wrong. Like, oh, who hasn't done that?
Yeah, I know, and it's so interesting too, because like you said, even other NDEers will disagree sometimes on things, and it's usually because, like you said, they haven't quite gotten to that point where they're ready to fully accept things yet. For example, I've had people comment on different posts and so forth, and say, well, I had a near-death experience. I was on the other side. There's not a God there. There's not a Jesus there. It's, everybody is one, and all this stuff. And then others say, it's almost like they're raising their hands, like, wait a second, though, I saw him, I talked to him, and it just makes me think it's kind of like if you were to take, say, an alien from another planet, give them 10 minutes on Earth, just pop them into 10 minutes on Earth. They're going to meet other humans. They might see some technology. They might see a car go by. They might, and they'll have enough to take back pretty good information about Earth, but everybody's going to have a different experience. One's going to say, no, what are you talking about? All I saw was plants and bugs. That's all I saw. Another's going to say, I was planted in this place and there was just buildings. I didn't see any plants, and the fact is, the spirit world, this eternal world that we all come from and go to, is a massive place.
Right.
And it's, I get the impression one of the major reasons we come here is to learn and grow, because we are just hungry for experience, and we want to have more of it. And if you have a place full of eternal beings with amazing abilities, you're going to have an incredibly diverse place to. Not everyone's going to see the same things. If they did, it means we're all headed for the same, beautiful hallway that never ends. And how boring is that? I mean, it's like no one would try to turn Earth into all just a New York City, or all into a rainforest. We want New York. We want the rainforest. We want the Swiss Alps. We want it all, because we are incredibly diverse creatures, and that's a beautiful thing. And just that recognition of that people have different kinds of experiences is powerful, and it's humbling. I mean, there's no question about that. It's a way of saying, I don't know everything about what's going on. And you talked a little bit about how about the people saying, well, this isn't in the Bible and that's not in the Bible. I'm an avid Bible studier, and everything I read in the Bible sounds so much like, for one thing, you've got Jesus that's teaching the principles that people are taught in their near-death experience. And then there's all these experiences like the book of Revelation that sounds like a pretty wild near-death experience itself. I mean, it's a pretty intense thing. And if you can have people visit the other side and experience very different things that are not contradictory to others' experiences, just different things, then of course you're going to have, in, for example, the book of Revelation, they will see these things, and in the book of Daniel, they'll see these things that are a totally different kind of revelation, but not inconsistent, just different. And I have yet to find things that tell me that near-death experiences can't fit with the Bible. In fact, quite the opposite. The more experiences I read, the more I'm like, wow, these things have been going on for thousands of years, and we have biblical evidence of that. So I just think it's cool that way.
Well, after I went through the tunnel, my 25-year-old NDE, the moment I was first in the bright white light, and there was no me hovering around, before I seen the panel of people and all that happened, my first thought as I'm alone was, oh, wow, it is real. The whole Bible, Jesus, God thing, it is real. Because I wasn't in a coffin, scratching my way out like I thought when I watched the scary movies when I was a kid. That was my fear of death. Because I went to church and Sunday school, and you hear there's heaven, but I couldn't picture that. And so I watched the scary movies, and I thought, I want cremated because I'm scared to death. I'm going to be in a coffin. I'm going to wake up and I'm going to be scratching my way out. So, but it is real. You do go somewhere. I am, living. Something does happen after we die. I knew I had died because we just went through that tunnel. But my NDEs was 20 years apart and were so different. So if I would have just had the one, either the first or the second, I would have thought, well, that's not like mine. But my 5-year-old NDE, I was just this ghost kid running around, and a scene opened up of a memory of my past to help explain something to me. And so now I understand how scenes open up and show us things. So why can't a whole different scene open up as a whole near-death experience? Someone in this beautiful lake, or someone in the desert, or someone whatever. And then because the second one was totally different, but a scene opened up there when I first started arguing with God and telling him off. A scene opened up. It wasn't a memory of mine. He just opened up, like if he said, okay, here's this bedtime story for this kid, and they're going to understand the value of telling the truth, some kind of fairy tale, right? They'll tell you that. But what happened was this scene opened up, and I watched, turned my head to the left, and I watched, and it was all color and everything, and I'm in this white. And it was a scene of like if you had just walked into a grocery store, when you first walk in the doors and you see the checkout lady and she's checking people out. It was like that. Like you just walked in and this kid's throwing a fit. And that was God's way of showing me as a young mother, I believe. You're acting like a spoiled child. You need to calm down. And there again, we're talking about anger and how to meet people with anger. And this child was throwing the fit, and the mother was standing there. And it seemed like there was a father too, but it was like the mother was more forward. And she was like, no, you can't have that. And that showed me God's reaction to me. It was unaffected by my tantrum. You know, like your child, like you've got several kids, you know, like they're throwing a fit, and you're kind of like, yeah, in the store, and you're like reacting,
nope.
like, please don't do this now or whatever. But they were just like, no,
Nope.
just unaffected and calm. And I'm like, wow, that's how to respond to anger. Is that no?
Yeah.
Not happening. No. It wasn't
It's
like,
that,
you little
that's not
brat, you better
acceptable.
stop it. You know, it wasn't none of that. No. And I thought, well, I'm not going to affect him. I'm not going to sway him.
Right.
Acting like this. I'll try something else. But yeah. So yeah, it's all amazing, every one of them. And we were talking about Raymond Moody a while ago, and I heard him talking one time, and I think it's the only time I ever heard him say it. And if he has more, I don't know. But he had they lost a baby.
Oh.
And I can't help but wonder if that was his interest deep down when he started learning about near-death experiences. It wasn't wondering, where did that baby go? Is that baby, you know, I'm going to see him again? And I was talking yesterday to an NDE, and we were talking about losing a child. Actually, it was a guy that has a grief to growth program. And then a lady before that, she had lost a baby at birth. And so there's two in a row. We didn't even plan that way, but we ended up talking about losing a child with my twins, you know, losing a child. And I know for me, that grief, along with having NDEs and spiritual experiences, pushes me to go forward and wanting to learn more all the time. And so I just couldn't help but wonder if they had lost a baby at birth. And if, you know, that maybe has sparked that child had that influence on his life to where we are now with near-death experiences.
You know, that's really interesting you mentioned that. I had not thought of it myself, but I would like to look back. My wife and I had 2 miscarriages. We have 6 children now, but between some of those children, we had a couple of miscarriages. And I wish I could remember. I'd have to look in my journals to see how the timing lines up with when I started looking into these things. I do remember in some of the early books that I read, the book Heaven is for Real, which is a fun one, because, you know, it's about a 4-year-old kid who has this experience, and we're hearing it all from the dad's point of view, and it's very beautifully well written.
He
and so
sees
forth.
his sister
But
as a miscarriage.
Exactly. He sees his sister, and you know, he's talking to his mom one day. He's like, I have 2 sisters, and his mom's like, oh, you mean so and so? I can't remember the
Cassie, I
details,
think.
something like that. Yeah. And she's like, no, another one, the one that died in your tummy or something. She's like, I never told you about that. And she goes to her husband, did you ever tell him about that? No, I haven't said anything. And he describes her in detail, and they ask her, well, what was her name? And she's like, well, she didn't have one. You didn't give her one.
Right.
She's like, and the mom's like, we didn't know she was a she.
Right.
You know? And that, to me, I
And she goes, and
went
that's my
back
little
after reading
girl.
that. I was like, when was? Yes, exactly. And I go back and I looked at. I don't remember exactly how far along she had been, but it was very similar to the time that my wife had been. And I just remember it striking me and just like, you know, there's probably 2 other children there. And now my wife and I, we tell each other, whoever gets there first gets to name them. We've got a few names that we've battled between, like, I'd like to name a kid this, but the other one doesn't agree. It's like, all right, whoever gets there first gets to pick pick some names. So but yeah, it was just a real deep comfort to me. But I hadn't thought about it in terms of the timing. I wonder if that may have been a factor. If I had children on the other side saying, Dad, I'd like you to know some more detail about what's going on here or something. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. But
I wrote.
I have.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I wrote my twins' deaths in the family Bible, and that I would have miscarriages, and I would write their when they died. And then later I thought, why didn't I name them? So I just went through one time and just wrote down some random names, and I just wanted to have a name.
Cool.
I had the date that I lost them, I wanted to have a name. I was listening to Lee Whitting's NDE radio years ago.
I love his show.
I heard for the first time Robert Osgood one day, and he was in heaven, and he was going along, and these kids kept running up and just loving him, and he thought, who are these kids? And they just loved him like they knew him. And he was telling his wife about it later, and she said they had failed IVF, and they got looking, and the ages of the kids corresponded to their IVF, the years that they tried IVF. Wow. And I'm sitting there on my couch bawling because we had failed IVF. So I thought, maybe I got 19 from that failed IVF, because I made 20 embryos and 19 fertilized. So I'm going to have a lot of kids with me.
And it's so cool to think about, because all the things that make parenthood so hard here are not factors on the other side. There's so much of safety worries and stuff like that. But you don't have to worry about that on that side. So I'm like, if we have all that many more kids on the other side, that's great. Because that's, there's just, love is not something that gets divided. It only grows, with each kid. You love the previous kid every bit as much, and you just have the capacity for that much more love. That's just how love works, so having that many more on the other side is just such a comfort to think about, especially with how hard this life can be, and the people we lose, and the people that we, when we have such hopes and so forth, that there can be real heartbreak, and it is real heartbreak, and we do need to mourn, and we do need to experience that grief. But it's so comforting to know that grief is temporary, because there's no one truly lost ever.
Well, I commend you for having 6 children. When I had my 9 adopted, plus my 2 stepdaughters was always with us. My 3 boys is already grown and out of the house, or if they were still in the house, they weren't going to hang out with us. They were teenagers. Yeah. But so when we go to the grocery store, or we go somewhere, we got a lot of glares. We'd have to really fill up a couple carts. And I know they thought we were welfare. And sometimes I'd say, this come down my checking account, no welfare here, because they would just, have a few things in their cart and be glaring at me. Or they would say, what is this, a Girl Scout troop? Because it was 10 girls and a little boy. So, yeah.
Well, you know what? For sure, one of the things that this whole thing has taught me too is that non-judgment idea, because it's, I don't know, for me it's like there's so many things that I either previously believed or previously judged and so forth, that it's like God takes those things and says, oh, so that's what you think about that. Let's let you try some of that. Have a little of that, a little of your own medicine there, not out of spite, but out of love. Really, he's like, you know what? I think the fastest and most effective way to teach you this is to have you experience some of that yourself, and I think, in my own life, we've experienced a lot of that. So many things that, I place judgments on something, and then God says, you know what? Let's give you a taste of that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just amazing how he works, I think. Sometimes we're not too fond of the lessons. Like you said, having your temper tantrum with God. I think we all have temper tantrums with him in life sometimes too. But he's so loving, he's so patient, and it's like you say, he's like, no, calm down and we'll talk about this. Kind of thing. So.
And when I was growing up, I was so skinny and malnutritioned, and I didn't like food at all. And I was like 80 pounds in my senior year. I finally got up to 80 pounds. And I was like 140, 9 months pregnant, ready to deliver with my boys, and then took it right off, a 6-week checkup. And my husband and I, we met when I was 36, and I was like 116 pounds, I was size 1. And now I'm fat. And I'm like, I didn't like fat people. I didn't understand how anybody could get fat or be fat. And I ended up, the government dumped ladybugs in, I guess, to get rid of snakes or get rid of something. Well, I happen to be the highest or the most allergic person on record to ladybugs. And
oh no.
And they're attracted to wood-sided houses, and our house was wood-sided.
Yeah.
They're attracted to apple orchards. We got an apple orchard nearby. Attracted to pine trees. Well, we got them everywhere. And so they were getting in my house. Plus, we're always under construction, so we have places that are really still good. And we didn't know why I was getting so sick with bronchitis every year. Couldn't get rid of it. And they started packing me full of steroids. And finally, I realized, and they found out I was telling the truth. And they tested me on I'm the most allergic person on record. Like, I could die from ladybugs.
Oh, wow.
Like, I had to carry
my
EpiPen
goodness.
and stuff. And so, meanwhile, all these prednisone packs, boom, boom.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yep.
But yeah, I heard something one time. It said you can't see eye to eye with someone when you're looking down your nose at them.
That is true. I love that. It's the truth.
So what are you doing nowadays? Are you you play the piano? I mean,
I do play the piano. I haven't been doing it as much the last few years. As far as a job, I pretty much, the consistent thing is I'm an entrepreneur. I'm always trying things, and you might say a creative entrepreneur, because it's always creative based things. And I had probably 10 to 12 years of just really trying to push the musician thing and make it work. And I still get a very, very small passive income from music sales and so forth, but it's, pocket change, really.
but it's what you love,
I'm sure. Yeah, it absolutely. The thing that I've been doing the past couple of years that has been really fun and fulfilling for me is we opened a garden shop selling trees, especially fruit trees, berry tree bushes, and berry plants and so forth. Just basically perennial edible foods, things that I'm really into, this idea of a food forest and growing. If you were to see my stuff, it just looks like wilderness is what I'm going for. But there's berries on them, and there's you can cook this and cook it like greens and things, and I've had such fun with that over the years trying to do that. But last year, it was during the whole COVID thing that we opened. I'd actually placed an order, my first order for plants, big, huge order of plants in February. And then lockdown starts, and we're like, oh no, and we were to open in May, and I was like, oh boy, is this going to work? And so we had to really think about how are we going to do this. And we thought, well, people want to be, they're more comfortable if they're outdoors. And, we're in a small town. Why don't we try doing something where you can come and buy your plants, put the money in a drop box, or pay with Venmo or PayPal or something. And then you don't even have to interact with anybody if you don't want to, And so we started putting that out there, and it went really well. And so we did it again this last year and went 2 or 3 times bigger, and it did phenomenal. And so we're trying to go bigger next year. And it's been really fun, because for me, it's an opportunity to to have that connection with nature by bringing it to where we are, and also to be able to give and provide it for people around our area. We're in a really cold climate, and it's hard to find plants that grow in our climate. And I'm like, no, there's tons. You just have to know where to get it, and so forth. So I'm like, well, I'll have to start providing that.
Have you thought about doing a podcast on that? Because my husband watches farming channels, and they get millions of views. He watches that every night.
It's interesting you say that, because I just started up. I actually started a few years ago and then put it away for a while, but I just started up again a podcast. It's called Wild Tater. Wildtater.com is the website. Just my focus is on individual plants, how cool they are, what they're good for, how to grow them, things like that. And it's really been fun. I'm just getting started with that. So it's brand new, but I'm having so much fun with it, and it's been interesting on the topic of near-death experiences. And I've had this interest in plants and animals and so forth, how those two subjects amazingly come together so beautifully. I mean, when you hear of near-death experiences of people, their dog comes to meet them, their bird comes flying and starts talking to them, and they're like, what is this you're talking? And they have this beautiful connection with their animals. And even people are able to connect with plants and flowers and so forth in ways that don't even make sense here, but they are able to do it there.
I think it's that conscious realm. They're all in that conscious realm.
And I heard one near-death experiencer describe it this way. They said that while they were on the other side, while they were still here, but they had left their body, and they could see the world in kind of a new view, and they could see that nature around us kind of acted to the spirit world. And what that means exactly, I don't know, except that I think we get a glimpse of it when you talk to people, and they're like, when I'm out in camping, or I'm up on the mountaintop or something, they just feel this deep spiritual connection. And I think it's that kind of antenna that I think there is a level of spiritual consciousness in plants, in animals, in the atmosphere, in the earth itself, that kind of pulls us toward God in a way. And I think it's a beautiful thing. I just think it's beautiful.
Yeah. A lot of near-death experiencers will say even the blades of grass communicated, the water, the animals, the trees, everything was alive and communicating. And for over 50 years, I didn't understand my memory after my drowning. And it made no sense. I can't tell people that. It makes sense. And I started telling people about that, but still don't make sense, but I'm still telling it. Maybe I'll understand someday. And I kind of think I do now, but because after my drowning, our family went to a lake, the road, and went fishing, and which we'd done a lot. But this time, everything was different. I wasn't interested in fish anymore, because underwater, they were bumping into me and stuff after I drowned. And so, but I felt led. And it was the first time of feeling led, which is now a part of my life. But I felt led, and I thought, I'm being led this direction. And I'm thinking, but I don't want to go that way. I want to go over here because it's a pretty lake, and then all this, sunshine. Like, no, you're not going over there. You're going over here on the right. I don't want to. And I went and I stood there, and I'm thinking, why am I here? Because like something was communicating with me, leading me and talking to me. And I was staying there. Why am I here? It's so ugly. It was dry, cracked mud, sticks, and dry, crappy leaves just stuck in that mud. And, ew, I hate it here. It's like void of life. And I thought, why am I here? And then I noticed a flower growing out from underneath the rock, in this dry, cracked mud, and this beautiful flower. And I went over, And I sat down, this little 5-year-old kid, and I'm like, how did you grow here? And I'm talking to it, which wasn't normal for me as a child up to that point or since. How did you grow here? This void of life with no water, and you're just so perky, and it just looked like it was dancing in the wind. It was just, And as I sat there, I started getting these visions and communication that was telling me about my future and stuff.
Oh,
and then I started hearing people talk about the flowers were alive in heaven. Like, wait a minute. And then, we're talking about the consciousness, like, the animals and the plants and the trees. And, somebody asked me a while back, do you talk to plants? Like, no. Or do you get something? No. But I love to put my hands on a tree and just stand there with my hands on a tree. And I feel something, and I don't know what it is, but I feel it. Like, I feel its life. And my husband and I go in the woods. I'm always bugging him because, well, look at this tree. It's got all these vines wrapped around. We got to tear these vines off so it's not being choked. And this tree's leaning. Get a stick. We need to prop it up so it
help it out. Yeah.
Now he has a sawmill. We got to go cut trees. I'm like, oh no, not that tree.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too. I think it was my study of near-death experiences and some of the experiences like you described, which is beautiful, that made me start to, because I'd felt a connection with plants and animals, throughout my life, and I started thinking, what if there is a way to communicate with them? And with animals, I don't know, I guess for me, it feels quite natural. And there's a lot of body language and things like that's involved with most people with pets, come to recognize and so forth. But I've been curious over the years, and not to go too far on a tangent here, but yeah, I've started paying attention to how plants communicate, recognizing them as somehow sentient at some level, consciousness at some level. There must be some way to communicate, and I've started to, I don't know if you could call it methods or just little recognitions that I think I'm starting to get how they communicate. And it's so interesting because, in this mortal world, everything happens on the level of the person or the being or the creature, as it is as a mortal. And, plants seem to communicate very slowly. And there's something just amazingly beautiful about that. We think of, because on the other side, there's like no time in some way. And then as people, we're operating very quickly. We're just zoom to one thing to the next. And then, animals very much the same. And you look at flies, and they're even faster than us. So they're just going. And I got thinking, what if plants are operating on a slower level? And as I started looking into that a little bit and kind of observing my own plants and thinking, what are you trying to tell me? And being willing to be patient over time, I'm realizing I think they communicate rather effectively if we're just willing to listen over a year's time or over several months and so forth. And we're so impatient. We want the answer now. We want, I said something, now you got to respond. and I'm really excited for the other side when I can just talk to my plants and they can respond and we can have this.
I think it's so cool how there has to be a male and female plant, and how they reproduce and how they do communicate. I mean, they do have found that trees communicate and stuff, and even across long distances. And it's all it's all beyond us. And people might roll their eyes and laugh and think that's so silly, but no, it is not that you don't.
No.
It's just that we don't see it. It's beyond us.
That's right.
There's some guys, NDE, I heard recently, and when he was in heaven, he was shown like a life review, And something he would have never even thought of, God found such beauty in and pointed out to him, now this is beautiful. And he was running to do something real fast, and he seen a plant, and he went ahead and dumped this water because he seen the plant needed water, and he dumped it. And he says that you took time to do that. As busy as he was, he noticed it needed help, and he gave it help. And that was so beautiful to God. I'm like, oh my gosh, I better get my plants on before they freeze.
I know. I worry about my indoor house plant. I struggle with house plants because they're usually somewhere between dead and working their way that direction. But I'm like, I'm so sorry, you guys. But yeah, I feel like there's something to be said for that, because like you say, it was maybe not so much that he was doing some great thing per se, but that he was doing it out of an act of genuine, albeit simple and gentle, but genuine love. It was just a moment of selflessness, you might say. He just thought about this planet, it could use that. And so he did it out of love, and that turned out to be a big thing because it was done out of love. It makes me wonder what we could do, what we could accomplish if we just acted out of just a genuine sense of love, in our day-to-day life. And, I've heard the argument or question come up a lot of times. Well, but if you're doing it to try to, I don't know, win points in heaven, so to speak, or you're doing it because you want this incredible life review, you're doing it selfishly, so to speak, then is it really an act of love? And I used to wrestle with that until I don't know if it occurred to me, I don't remember if there was something that I read or what, but I realized that an act of love toward the self is absolutely an act of love. And so an act towards somebody else for both of your benefit is absolutely an act of love. And so, if you're going to take somebody dinner who is struggling, and deep down that you're kind of doing it because it feels good to you, it's going to make you feel good about yourself and so forth, that's okay.
Yes,
that's great, because you're doing
self-love.
An act of love, and you need that self-love too. So it's a doubly act of love in that sense. And so I don't think it needs to be an argument. I think it can be both. And,
I have done
that's a beautiful thing
for people that have been so mean to me, and I'm doing something loving for them. And I'll tell my husband, I better get some big angel wings for this, because they don't deserve it.
That's right. That's right. And I think that love does go both ways. And the thing is you just never know what things, excuse me, are going to touch people in some way, because you hear of, once in a while you hear from somebody who said, when you said that to me, it really touched me, or it really stuck out to me. And at the time you weren't really trying to say something amazing. You were just saying what, came into your heart at the moment, and it seemed so small at the time, but it touched somebody deeply. That tells me if we're just out trying to do things out of love, we're going to make a huge difference in this world. And that difference might not be visible to us while we're here. It may be, a domino effect that affects generations down the line, because somebody, you helped somebody at a critical moment when they were ready to break a chain in their generational poverty or generational abuse or something, and you were just there to help kind of nudge them just far enough that they were able to break that chain. And that means generations down the line are blessed and loved because of that simple act that you did, and
so many people, and which is a good thing to do. I mean, like if you have kids and they have a kid visiting and they're kind of the bad kid, and you think that's probably a bad influence on my child. I don't know if I want that child around, but that's the kid that might need it most, that might need your positive. And my boys had 3 teenagers, and they had a lot of cousins, because my ex's big family. And so we always had a lot of kids here, and they always had their friends here. in our basement, we had one big room, had a pool table and a TV, and they would just go in and out through that basement door. And, we wouldn't know who was here and who wasn't. And I said, as long as there's never a problem, I will trust you until you give me a reason not to. And I never had a reason not to. But there was this one kid called MG, is a friend of my boys. And he walked in here one day. He come through the front door. I don't know why he would come through the front door instead of the basement. I wouldn't see him probably. But he had on it was like an upside down cross or something. It was something atheist. And his cousin was Marilyn Manson.
Okay.
And I guess my better judgment, I did let my son go with him to his Marilyn Manson's opening of Scream or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Because there's like Scream people there and then like him there. There's a lot of celebrities. And I'm like, this is a once in a chance opportunity. And he's 16 and they're going to drive and go. I'm like, okay, I'll let you go. Like cover my eyes. I know, because I can't say no, but anyway, so this boy, I had to correct him a couple times. He was only one of the kids that come in and out. You can't wear that shirt in my house. He says, well, it's my shirt. I'll do what I want. And I said, yeah, but not in my house. I said, turn it inside out. So he'd go back outside, put his shirt on, come back inside out. And he would confront me about it. I was like, hey, you can wear it, just not in my house.
Yeah.
You're not wearing something satanic against God, Christian, in my house. You wear it to school, you wear it with my sons, but not in my house. I mean, I wasn't that big a religious fanatic, but I didn't like it. And and so he's the one to really butt heads with. He would confront me on other things too. And here a few years ago, because my boys are now just going in their 40s, it was probably like 10 years ago. He was messaging me back when everybody had MySpace, I think it was, before Facebook. And he got talking to me and he said, you have no idea how much going to your house meant to me because I didn't have a mom. And mom had walked out on him, and it was, he didn't have anybody at home. He didn't have any siblings. His dad wasn't much or whatever to him. And he said, you have no idea what it meant to be part of your family. And I'm like, wow, so cool. I didn't know if you liked me because you and I butt heads. He's, no, you were in the right. It was your house. I had to respect it. So you never know.
That is so cool. And at the time, you may be worried, is he a bad influence on my kid? As it turns out, your kid and your family and yourself are being the good influence on him. So cool. Yeah. So cool.
And I spent the night with my friend who's been my friend since I was 16. And she ended up being my sister-in-law for a few years, and I have a niece with her, or my niece is her daughter. But anyway, I spent the night with her as a teenager, and I was the bad kid. And they lived in a trailer. They had 6 girls, and they overheard. I think okay, there you are. You disappeared for a second, and they overheard some of the trash I was talking. And her dad, who was a preacher, had told her the next day, she's not allowed back here. And I respected him for that.
Mm-hmm.
I did. I respected him for it. And later she's, oh, he loved you. And it's like, oh, no, he did the right thing. I was a bad influence. Hey, you were a preacher's daughter. He did the right thing. Because I probably could have turned her or led her astray.
Yeah. It shows too that it's like a candle being passed around. Their light on you was not diminished by sharing it with you, and then you're sharing it with with your kid's friend. It's that's how light goes around in the world. By those small acts of love and willingness to reach out to each other. And it is a challenge because there obviously does come a point in our lives when sometimes we have to cut people out of our lives because they're, it's just a toxic situation, or we can see that our kids are in danger and so forth. But most of the time it's that opportunity to extend light, and it's just beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah, sometimes we do have to cut people out. It's just not a good fit for whatever reasons for us to move forward. So well, I have enjoyed you coming on And I can't
Thank you,
believe we have
Peggy.
talked so long.
I know. I think the reason my phone blipped for a minute because it gave me the low power mode or the low battery mode. I'm good. I've still got 20%, but it was
Okay.
like, you sure you want to keep doing this because you're using? I'm like, I'm fine. Don't even worry.
Is there anything final you'd like to say? Anything you now aren't you
Oh,
like singing NDE songs or something? Am I wrong?
say that again.
Aren't you your music? Is it has something to do with near death experiences?
Oh, well, not exactly, but I have it's, and you can see the one that I'm referring to on the website Near Death Experience Podcast. Or, and recent album, I was deep into this studying this stuff, and I was especially interested in in experiences where music was mentioned because, like I said, I was a musician and I'd been writing music for years, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool to try to write an album that at least attempts to mimic maybe what the music on the other side might be like. And so that was kind of the attempt of that album. And it it was partially inspired because the very first one, I had this idea to try to write music that might be what it sounds like on the other side. Haven't been there, so I can't say for sure. But I wrote the first one, which, if I remember right, is the one called The One, or I think that's what it's called, The One, something like that. Anyway, it's the first one on the album. And after I finished the recording, I was going to bed that night, and and I was very relaxed and so forth. Those nights when you actually know you're going to bed at just the right moment because it feels good. You're not like, pass out 5 seconds in, and also you're not going to lay there for an hour. It was just that very relaxed, feel good, laying down to sleep. And as I'm laying there, I start hearing the music that I'd been writing. And for a second, I thought I'd left my phone on or something, with or the computer on, and I checked, and no, it wasn't on. And I laid back down, and I could hear it again. And it was, at first I was like, what's going on? And then I was like, you know what? Let's just accept this and just just go with it. And so I just laid there and fell asleep to this sound of the music. And while asleep that night, I had the most beautiful dream of my grandfather who had died just a few years earlier. And I think at the time I wrote down what we talked about in the dream, but I don't even remember, but I just remember waking up in the morning and just feeling that love and his presence and everything. And it didn't occur to me till later, till probably a week or so later, that grandpa was the one that inspired my love of learning to play music by ear. He had taught me a couple of piano pieces that had kind of ignited my interest, and I'd known that he had learned to play piano by ear, and he had been an inspiration to me to learn to really play and so forth. And I was like, whoa, there's something going on here, because I write this music that's attempting to sound like heaven, and then I have this beautiful dream of my grandfather who was the inspiration for my music. And I'm like, I wonder if he put that music in my head or something, if he inspired it in the first place. I don't know, but it's one of those things that things go full circle when you're open to willingness to consider the possibility that maybe the other side is trying to reach us too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think so. I think like with the plants,
Yeah.
how you were feeling something, and like with that, it's
Yeah.
just being open to the
Yeah.
connection.
Yeah.
If we keep saying, oh, that's silly, or oh, that didn't just happen, or oh, I'm being weird, we're not going to be open when those windows open up to where we can
Yeah.
reach on the other side.
and it's not that hard to open to that too, because all we have to do is catch ourselves every time we're saying, oh, that's silly, oh, that's, that's a coincidence, and so forth. Just stop yourself right there and say, but what if maybe there's more going on here? And as we do that, I think that they start happening more often because we become more open to it.
And I was pushing away, I guess you would say, messages I was getting, because I would say, no, I ain't doing that, or no, I'm not going to, I don't want to. And I'm like, then I'd stop. Who are you talking to?
Yeah.
You're not talking to yourself. There's a voice coming in. It's not yours. Otherwise, you wouldn't be arguing with it. You would be, it's not something I want to do. Like, you need to, go get your friend because your dad's dying. I don't want to. I was sweaty. I was painting. I wanted to get this job done. You need to go. I don't want to. And then every time I've not listened to it, I've regretted it. Something's happened. Like, darn it, I knew it. I was told to do it and I didn't do it. Like, you need to start listening.
Yeah. I think those messages are there if we're willing to hear them.
Well, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Oh,
and
thank you, Peggy. This has been wonderful.
I hope to see you on a podcast showing me how to plant berries. Because I've been trying to grow grapes. I've been trying to grow blueberries. And I don't know what I'm doing. Years ago, I planted a bunch of fruit trees. And none of them did well. I don't know what. I guess you gotta have a male and female on a fruit tree too. I didn't know what I was doing. And everybody says, "Well, look online."
There you go.
Well, I don't understand it.
Yeah.
There's too much information. If somebody could just show you simply, step by step, like for dummies.
Yeah.
This is what you got to do.
Well, I would be happy to. That would be fun.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Well, thank you, Peggy. Bye.
Bye.